They say history never dies. It just lingers, watching, waiting. But what happens when history itself turns hostile? Tonight, we're diving into a chilling encounter in the quiet town of Godalming, Surrey, a place where the past clawed its way into the present, leaving terror in its wake. What you're about to hear is a true account of a modern-day exorcism involving over 3,000 restless spirits. Yes, you heard that right. And it all took place in a seemingly ordinary Tudor flat, built over 450 years ago. The same flat that had become a battleground for something far more sinister than creaky floors and cold drafts. This is the story of one woman's fight against an ancient evil, a fight that required the help of Antonia Harman, a self-proclaimed exorcist whose methods are as unconventional as they are powerful. But this isn't just a tale of ghostly bumps in the night. It's about murder, satanic rituals, and the discovery of buried secrets that have left their mark on this small town. So, are you ready to uncover the truth? Because once you step into this dark chapter of Godalming's history, there's no turning back. Let's begin. The story begins in the quiet, picturesque town of Godalming, Surrey, a place where old architecture and charming streets mask a far darker history. The Tudor flat at the center of our story had been home to a resident who'd grown increasingly desperate. She had tried everything to rid her home of the persistent, malevolent presence she felt every single day. The kind of energy that makes your skin crawl, that pricks at your nerves even in the daylight. When traditional attempts to rid the flat of its eerie inhabitants failed, she turned to Antonia Harman, an exorcist known for her rather unconventional approach to dealing with spirits. Harman was not your typical priest, reciting prayers and sprinkling holy water. Her methods were rooted in energy manipulation and something she calls the cleansing tornado. But before we get to that, let's address the most disturbing part of this haunting: the identity of the spirit that seemed to hold the most control over the property. According to Harman, the flat's dark energy was tied to a female spirit, vicious and enraged, a spirit that resented the residents' attempts to remove her. And why? Because the woman was, by all accounts, a murderer, a killer with a twisted desire for control. But how does Harman claim to know this? And why were there so many spirits trapped within this one building? For that, we need to dive into the grim history of the flat itself. To understand the true horror of what transpired in that Tudor flat, we have to go back, way back. The building itself was constructed over 450 years ago, a structure as ancient as the very earth it was built upon. And like many old English buildings, its walls had absorbed the stories of everyone who ever stepped foot inside. But some of those stories were tainted by darkness. During the early investigations, Harman discovered a shocking piece of local history. In 2013, during an archaeological survey conducted on a nearby site, approximately 300 skeletons were unearthed from beneath a car park. Their origins? Murky at best. Their deaths? Violent and unexplainable. This discovery seemed to awaken something in the area. Paranormal reports started flooding in. Shadows where there shouldn't be shadows. Cold spots in rooms that were otherwise warm. And of course, the relentless feeling of being watched. But the horror wasn't just tied to the bones below. The flat itself was rumored to be the site of at least 10 murders over its lengthy history. Victims who had fallen to poison, strangulation, and other brutal fates. And many of those deaths were suspected to be linked to satanic rituals conducted by a secretive group that once inhabited the area. And then there was the woman, Harman described her as a psychopathic figure, a controlling presence who had poisoned at least 4 people. Her motives unclear, her anger very real. According to Harman, this spirit wasn't just malicious, she was territorial, and anyone who attempted to remove her was treated as an enemy she was willing to destroy. But how does one exorcise a spirit so deeply rooted in darkness? How do you remove a force so entwined with pain, blood, and history itself? That's where the so-called cleansing tornado comes into play. Antonia Harman isn't your typical exorcist. Forget everything you've seen in the movies. There were no priests, no holy water, no Latin incantations. Instead, Harman approaches her work with something she calls the cleansing tornado. According to Harman, the cleansing tornado is a process where she channels her energy, creating a swirling, spiraling force designed to dislodge and remove spirits trapped within a particular space. She claims that this technique is highly effective when dealing with areas plagued by multiple entities, and in this case, there were a lot of them. Harman states that through her process, she was able to remove approximately 3,000 spirits from the flat and its surrounding area. Yes, you heard that right, 3,000. Some of these spirits, she says, were merely lingering energies, ghosts left behind by centuries of life and death. But others were far more dangerous, and the most powerful of all was, of course, the female spirit who seemed to have claimed the flat as her own. The cleansing tornado, if you believe in such things, didn't just expel the spirits, it also purified the energy of the building, restoring it to what Harman describes as a state of energetic balance. But the question remains, did it actually work? Or was it simply a psychological placebo, a desperate attempt to rid a home of imagined terrors? We'll get to that. But first, let's explore what the resident experienced once the ritual was over. So, what happened after the cleansing tornado? Did the heavy, oppressive energy vanish? Was the murderous female spirit finally gone? According to the resident, the change was immediate. She described a sudden lightness to the air, a feeling of peace she hadn't experienced since moving into the flat. The shadows no longer seemed to dance in the corners of rooms. The chill that had seeped into her bones during restless nights had lifted. And it wasn't just her perception. Friends and visitors reported a noticeably warmer, more inviting atmosphere. It was as if the flat itself had been holding its breath for centuries and could now finally exhale. But perhaps the most startling claim was that not only had the female spirit been removed, but also thousands of others. Some of them mere remnants of energy, fragments of lives that had ended there. Others were supposedly more conscious, lingering with intention. Of course, this is where the skeptics step in. Was this truly an exorcism of 3,000 spirits? Or was it a case of psychological suggestion? A clever way to convince someone desperate for relief that they were finally safe. But for the resident of that Tudor flat, the results felt very real. And to her, that's all that mattered. Still, the questions remain unanswered. Was the cleansing tornado genuinely effective, or just a performance designed to give the illusion of safety? And if it was effective, what exactly did Harman banish from that place? Now that we've gone through the supposed exorcism, let's dig deeper. What do we really know about Harman's methods? And is there a scientific explanation for any of this? It's easy to be swept away by a tale of dark forces and dramatic exorcisms. But let's not ignore the other side of the coin. The skeptics. Many psychologists argue that what Antonia Harman did may have been nothing more than a form of suggestive therapy. The idea that if you're convinced something is gone, your mind will adjust itself to fit that belief. After all, Our brains are incredibly powerful. Studies have shown that when people experience traumatic or stressful situations, their perception of reality can become distorted, especially when they're looking for explanations that feel comforting or rational. But what about the spirits? The supposed 3,000 entities removed from the flat? Surely there's some form of evidence to back that claim, right? Well, not exactly. Harman's cleansing tornado technique is highly unconventional. It's rooted in concepts of energy manipulation and spiritual healing, ideas that have been dismissed by most mainstream scientists as pseudoscience. Still, some paranormal experts are willing to give her credit. They argue that the sheer number of reports of unexplained occurrences tied to the flat can't all be dismissed as hysteria or suggestion, especially given the area's long, dark history. So, what's the truth? Was this a successful exorcism of malevolent spirits, or just a well-crafted psychological placebo? And more importantly, what does the resident truly believe? Let's wrap this up. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, one thing's for certain. This story leaves us with more questions than answers. Was the female spirit just a fragment of folklore, something twisted by history and fear? Or was there truly something there, something capable of spreading terror and darkness for centuries? As much as we like to think the past is dead and buried, it's clear that some parts of it refuse to rest. So, what do you think happened in that Tudor flat? Was it all just smoke and mirrors? Or did Antonia Harman's cleansing tornado really expel something malevolent from the property? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the world's creepiest, most unexplained events, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. After all, history might be written by the living, but it's the dead who often have the last word.